Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And in today's video, we are going to be doing a meta-analysis. We're going to be breaking down all of the specializations, their strengths, their weaknesses, which ones are looking like high performers, which ones are likely going to be struggling in the current meta. And as always, if you want to stay up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. Now, right now, it's looking like a really good time to get back into World of Warcraft. A patch is just dropping that's going to enable us really fast experience gains. I believe they are also uncapping Conquest, which means that you're gonna be able to level a bunch of alts, play whatever spec you want, which makes this information from this video even more valuable as well. But this is my favorite time in a patch, basically. MMR is going to start scaling a bit higher, getting rewards is going to be easier, getting more characters to play is going to be easier, so we can just have fun bouncing around onto whatever classes we really want. So to me, that's like the best time to play during a season, which is happening right now. Now, obviously, the biggest changes that came through with the most recent update was Ret Paladin buffs, and we can see that on the graph. What's funnily enough is Ret Paladins that were previously stuck at 1500 to 1799 rating, you guys all skyrocketed. Look at this. the Ret population, it was very high at like below 1800, and it almost, I don't know if this is bugged or whatever, because this looks so jarring to see, but I don't know if that just means that Ret Paladins automatically started skyrocketing, because you see as we get higher and higher rating, the graph just scales higher and higher for Retribution Paladin. Retribution Paladin is a really good pick across World of Warcraft. Like, doesn't even matter about the content. I think it's really strong at the moment in PvE. It's really strong 1v1, really strong in Battlegrounds, really strong in Arena. It's probably just the best spec to pick overall in the game, bar none. Yeah, you will not go wrong with Ret Paladin right now, most certainly. So definitely would recommend it. Fury Warrior, you're also doing remarkably well at the moment, skyrocketing in participation, leveling out a little bit towards the top end, maybe equalizing with Ret Paladin overall. But Fury Warrior is another one that's really good right now. It's just like a rock'em sock'em robot specialization. You just do a remarkable amount of damage and pressure almost at all times. It's a crazy amount of damage that Fury Warrior actually has available at the moment. I'm gonna have to give it a go again, because I've been spending some time on Arms Warrior, but now after seeing the tournament and seeing some like 50-0 executes, might also mean that you're on the radar for some nerfs, possibly. Really depends on if we're hitting the point of no return yet on this expansion. I'm assuming that they're following a similar kind of path as what they did with Dragonflight, and there was a point where class changes start to diminish. There's less and less of them. The frequency is of far more points in between the frequency of the changes, and if you hit that point and your class is strong, you want to hop on that class for a really long time, because you're going to get the most amount of value out of it. I don't know if we're at that point just yet, especially considering that MDI is coming up, so there will most certainly be changes, I would imagine, with PvE if there are things that are outstanding or egregious there, and obviously the finals as well. So likely there's still going to be some tweaks. Your class might not be 100% safe, but it's just important to take that into account. And maybe some of the specializations that I'm not going to recommend on this list might actually be stronger later. Arms Warrior is falling off in popularity just because Fury, I think, is a little bit easier to excel on. I think the main factors are just the Mortal Strike is stronger, because Arms Warrior can get some really big cracks of damage. But Fury Warrior's Mortal Strike ramp is just really, really powerful. There's two things they could do about that. They could either buff the baseline Mortal Strike, and then Arms and Fury are just absolutely godlike on ladder play for PvP, or they make it easier to like maybe spread Mortal Strike to multiple targets for Arms. But even that is not really like a viable strategy at the moment. It's very much so based around single target sustain or single target burst damage. AoE damage is a lot less valuable unless it's burst oriented, but like AoE sustain. So I think it's another reason Arms is a little bit lower. It's because typically it's got a little bit more AoE sustained with bleeds, whereas Fury is just all single target sustain or burst. But Arms is falling down. Not that it's not viable, right? We can still see it on the chart, doing really well at almost any rating threshold. So definitely still a really good pick. It's a very beginner friendly, moderate level difficulty specialization. Windwalker's been having a bit of a roller coaster, but I think it's just ended up in a really good position. It's a little bit more complicated, I think, than Warrior or Retribution Paladin, especially with how you have to manage your portal in order to escape and like be aware of that. So it's a little bit higher level of complexity. which I do think is likely restraining its levels a little bit lower than where Ret or Fury typically get when they are good or competitive with each other. But definitely really fun. I've had the most fun on Windwalker. Havoc Demon Hunter's also seen a little bit of a recent uptick. I think that's due to its representation in the tournament, because it's definitely a very solid specialization. Main weakness is Subtlety Rogue, but if you're queuing a lot of kind of just like solo queue format, you're not going to run into a lot of them, or a lot of them that are actually good enough or coordinated enough with their team and shuffle to actually find that weakness for Havoc Demon Hunter, unlike what we saw in the tournament. So I do think as far as ladder is concerned, Havoc Demon Hunter is a really good selection at the moment. When it comes to melee DPS, would definitely recommend it. Death Knight, you guys are still trending downward, and I think Death Knight's probably like one of my least recommended classes at the moment. It doesn't have enough survivability, and it doesn't have burst. It's a sustained AoE or sustained single target spec for Unholy typically, and those are just not valuable archetypes at the moment. It's single target burst that's desirable, or AoE burst that's desirable, which is why I think Frost is a better recommendation, because Frost is a AoE burst specialization over Unholy being an AoE sustained or even a single target sustained, and not having enough defense to be able to live to the point where that sustain is actually valuable. So DK is kind of a rough spot. Again, if you want to do Battlegrounds or something like that, I think Death Knight's always valuable. Death Grip and Chains of Ice is always going to be. But if you're doing mostly arenas, Death Knight might be one that you want to be a little bit hesitant around, unless you want to be the underdog, which is totally up to you. Feral Druid, we saw it, in the Europe finals. Like every team in Europe was a Feral Druid. And then over in North America, very few teams are feral. And I think there's a meta that is starting to birth, right? I think Ret Warrior is starting to dominate there. So feral will likely fall off in overall representation, but it does not mean that it is bad. I definitely think it is still a competitive option. It's really good across all formats of the game as well. Really strong 1v1, really strong Battleground Blitz, really good in Arena. It's definitely still one that I would recommend. But I think, again, when Ret ends up slightly stronger or even equal with feral, because feral is harder to play, it takes more effort to succeed. Most people follow human psychology, path of least resistance. While Ret's easier, faster results, I'm just going to go on Ret instead of feral. Doesn't mean that it's not viable. It's just going to be more of a personal choice that you want some added complexity to your specialization. When it comes to Rogue, it looks like right now Subtlety Rogue is trending up here with Assassination pretty equally, which I was surprised, because usually Assassination is a bit higher, and as we climb even into the higher ranks, Rogue is still kind of maintaining here towards around the 2 to 3% mark. I think Assassination is definitely the easier of the three if you want to pick up a Rogue spec, which I'm actually going to be leveling now with the XP boost. I want to get my Rogue going. I was thinking about doing some viewer 2v2 as well at some point, so if you guys want to pop in my stream, if you guys are looking to try and get your 1800, I did this back in Shadowlands. I'm sad to say that it's been that long since I did some viewer 2v2, I think, where I help viewers get to 1800. So if you guys want to try and get your elite sets, I think this is like now the best time to do it, because MMR is going up. I'm going to try and get some specializations that are going to be better at bumping people up, and do some more community content over there. But obviously Subtlety Rogue is like the most notorious for that, right, with Peekaboo doing it. Subtlety Rogue can be a carry spec, but it comes with frustrations that other classes just randomly put your stuff on stun DR. But really strong 1v1, really good in Battleground Blitz. Definitely more complicated than a lot of other melee, and I think if you go for Rogue at all, you're going to be wanting that level of complexity and understanding that initially there's going to be friction and you're probably going to struggle to see a lot of success, but that will pay out later on once you have mastered it, because it has some of the highest carry potential of any spec in the game. We saw it in the Europe tournament, we saw it in the North American tournament. Like Subtlety Rogue can definitely have its spot to shine. Survival Hunter is starting to trend a little bit higher. I think it's just because it's getting better kind of burst damage. Main problem for Survival is just generally control. You're kind of reliant on your DPS to have stuns, and if you're getting solo shuffle lobbies that classes don't have a lot of stuns, it's going to be really volatile, because you just have next to no control. Especially with Rets and Warriors bouncing around, going bing bong all over you the entire game, it's going to get pretty hard. But Survival's even doing slightly better, I think, as of late. But with the lack of stuns, lack of control, it's a little bit tougher to sink your teeth in with it. Enhancement Shaman is unfortunately still trending pretty low, even despite the buffs that it's most recently got. I don't know if they just need to modernize the game and consider giving Mortal Strike to Enhancement Shaman, so that Enhancement Shaman can work with more classes, because that's definitely a big restriction, is that you really only feel powerful when you're playing with a Warrior, a Windwalker, maybe occasionally a Rogue. And even when Enhance is like its best, it's because it's playing with a Warrior or Demo Lock in like Legion, for example. So maybe it does need to just have a Mortal Strike effect. so that it can have more viable compositions. Because right now, Enhance can burst about as hard as a Ret, but why is Ret all the way up here and Enhance is all the way down here? So it's got similar utility for its healer, right? With fear breaks, grounding totems to protect healers from incoming spells, but it's just a little bit lower. Now maybe it's because it's not enough range damage. Ret had a lot of changes to where it's basically like an evoker, where it's like a 20-yard range class. Maybe that's what it needs. Maybe it needs to become like a mid-range, more of a mid-range class. It has some abilities like that, right? Where when you activate Ascendance, you feel very strong because you're a mid-range class. But then when you don't have it, you feel kind of weak. And if you can't get uptime, it becomes more difficult, obviously. I think that's likely to trend up into the future because Rets and Warriors, what's their counter, right? Evokers and Mages. Evokers and Mages for Shaman, rough. They're rough to deal with as well. So you're probably, Enhance is going to be rough. Outlaw is trending at the absolute bottom now. I definitely think the nerfs that they applied to it, while I think were warranted, especially due to how powerful it was in the hands of the most skilled players, it's definitely going to bring its representation down. I think its own personal survivability has gone down. It's possible that they need to look at buffing burst damage on Outlaw, because to me, Rogue is something where it's like, burst damage should be high, crowd control is high, durability is low, mobility is high, but right now its burst damage is just not exceptional for how weak its defense has recently got nerfed. So it's probably still going to be kind of trending towards the bottom. Might be a melee DPS that you're only really going to play if you want to be an underdog. When we look at range DPS, you can see this graph is bouncing around quite a lot. Marksmanship Hunter is definitely dominating as far as solo shuffle and Battleground Blitz is concerned. Again, because it's single target burst, and I think generally that archetype's more valuable than Beast Mastery, which is single target sustain. But Beast Mastery does have so high single target sustain that it's still maintaining really high up here. So it's definitely possible that they can buff that archetype. Maybe that's just what Unholy needs. Buff its defense a little bit and buff more of its single target sustain, because if you hit the numbers right on tuning, you can definitely make single target sustain archetype work. BM is the best example of that, but Marksman is actually looking like one of the best specs to rip right now in shuffle. It equals a little bit more as you get higher rated, likely because you're finding a lot more warriors that know how to disarm you, and then obviously play classes become a little bit more difficult. But if you're in that beginner range to 1800 trying to get your elite set, Marksman is one of the best to just get quickly pop targets and get your rating. Frost is still trending towards the top here, even despite the nerfs that it got. It's still really good. High durability, overpowered barriers, just really strong. All instant cast damage that can hit as hard as some Marksmanship Hunter aim shot damage. So definitely a very good one to pick, and probably the easiest of the mage specs to play at the moment due to its durability and all of its instant damage. Elemental Shaman, another one that's really good. At the lowest rating, it looks like it kind of falls off a little bit harder. We see Frost like a lot higher. These graphs are so weird with like these random spikes to the bottom, but Ellie's definitely trending towards the top end. Again, really high durability, mostly instant cast damage. Main difficulty with Elemental, I would say, is that it's got a lot of keybinds. So if you want to avoid keybinds, you might want to avoid Shaman in general. Really just depends on what your goals and your aims are. Beastmaster, we already covered. It's just really strong single target sustain. Very simple gameplay. It's even easier now with the set bonus that just automatically applies barb shot to the target. So definitely a good one if you're just looking to pop on a class or an alt and try and get some rating a little bit faster. I do have guides also on my YouTube channel for all these classes. And Shadow Priest, I just got my 2400 challenge done on Shadow Priest, and it's because I switched one talent. I switched out PvP talent Siphene to Mind Trauma. My DPS went through the roof with that. It went through the roof with that. I was doing like 700k DPS. Now I'm doing 1.1, 1.3 million DPS. I don't know how that talent literally doubled my damage, but or something was bugged on my character, but my damage doubled, and I was able to get 2400 very easily after doing that. However, Fury Warrior popularity, I think, is going to be inversely related to Shadow Priest frustrations, right? And when we saw Windwalker go up, Fury Warrior go up, Shadow Priest is probably going to increasingly become more frustrating to play because it's a stationary caster, but it's probably one of the few stationary casters that actually has the durability to even be in those games. So it's going to be just probably medium level of pick. Warlock, on the other hand, I think is going to become more and more frustrating. We see Hunters, we see Ellies, we see Warriors, we see Windwalkers and Demon Hunters, right? And if Death Knights end up getting a buff, I think they need to look at increasing survivability for Warlock specs and for Boomkin and Death Knight. I think looking at those, bumping up the numbers on those would make a healthier experience if they were going to do any changes, because it's mainly just survivability. Affliction does really good overall damage, but again, sustained damage is not as valuable at the moment. Affliction is more of a sustained class. Can do really well in caster lobbies, but you're going to see pretty quickly how difficult it is to survive when there's a Fury Warrior, a Windwalker, or a Demon Hunter running at you. Boomkin's still holding pretty solidly in the mid here. And we can see like there's a big uptick for Devastation and for Og. And I think Devastation and Og is because they counter Warrior. They're really good into Warrior. So if you want to just like counter the meta and be ahead of players, I think you would make a swap right now to Devastation or to Augmentation, because those specs are going to, basically counter the trend of what people are doing right now, which is why I wanted to do this meta analysis, is kind of give you like a heads up, like, oh yeah, it's obvious Warrior's really strong, just make a Warrior. But if everyone's making a Warrior and then you pick the thing that counters the Warrior, you get to cash out on all the free CR. So definitely take that into account. I think Dev and Og are really good picks as a result because of that, and because rogues are coming down as Warriors go up, that's even better for Devastation. Arcane is falling a bit. I think it's just Arcane is just, especially at the lower rating, very hard to play, because you'll see as we get higher rating, Arcane starts to trend really up, or at least to more of a moderate level. But it's a complex spec, so but it's really fun once you get a hold of it. It's probably my most fun spec to play at the moment. But at a beginner level, it's going to be like I talked about with Rogue, where initially it's going to be friction, and it's going to be frustration. But if you can get past that, and get more reps in and get more practice in, it pays out with a huge amount of fun later, which is why I like that WoW has like a diverse pool of roles of difficulty, like easy, medium, hard, so that if somebody just wants to jump in for a couple of minutes a day, doesn't have a lot of time, doesn't want to really focus on getting a lot of key mines, they can have some fun with some of the specs. Some of the specs are more medium, so if you got a little bit more time, you can spend more time with it, get more out of it. And then some of the specs are really complex for people who have all day to basically play them, or really high levels of intelligence or something like that, to be able to learn it really quickly, because then you can satisfy a larger audience. So I'm of the opinion that it's good that we have a diverse range of difficulties, and not everything is just a Ret Paladin, not everything's just a Fury Warrior, not everything's just an Arcane Mage. We don't have just only extremes. I think that's actually a strength of WoW. Fire Mage, you're probably the least recommended range at the moment that I can say, and I think it's mostly just because you're basically Frost Mage. Frost Mage can plant sometimes to do damage, but still most of its damage is instant. That was the main advantage of Fire over Frost in the past, was that all your damage is instant as Fire, but Frost can plant and do significant damage and still do really good damage, even if it doesn't get to plant the entire game in one spot and cast. So Fire just it's not able to compete because it has no advantage over it. Whereas something like Arcane can hit like really high levels of burst that Frost can't. But downsides are that you can be interrupted, more easily controlled, which is why we see Frost trending so much higher than Fire or Arcane. And then Og, it's been up and down, but I think it's probably going to continue it's going down a little bit right now, but it's probably going to uptick again, because I think it's a really good counter to Warriors, and it has a really big one shot at the moment. Now, finally, healers. Healers are equalizing a little bit out. I've had a little bit more experience playing them, and I'll tell you right now, starting from the bottom, that Preservation Evoker is really difficult to play right now. It just feels like you struggle to keep up with a lot of the damage output of a lot of the classes. It's I would say that it's definitely the weakest healer, and this graph represents that pretty well, and at all rating thresholds, even if you're at the beginning, even more so at the beginning. At the beginning, the healers are actually pretty balanced, except poor little Prezi Evoker feels like it's going to need like something. I don't even know what you can really do. It's just damage is so high, and it doesn't have a lot of like mitigation tools, that it's like really tough to keep up with. I've had times where like you'll Verdant Embrace fly to a target and it like dies before you're even able to land on the target. So Prezi Evoker, probably the healer that you might want to avoid at the moment. It's just really difficult. Holy and Disc are evening out quite nicely on the ladder. I think Holy is still technically better, but they're definitely still competitive with each other. Resto Druid's upticking as well, another really good healer. Honestly, you can go for any of them. So if you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of time to play, and maybe you got a Shaman, maybe you play Enhance normally, you could switch over to Resto. Or if you're a Druid and you play Boomkin, you switch over to Resto, and it's going to be a lot faster queues. You're going to gear up a lot faster because you get extra Conquest as a healer. And then you're going to be able to get your rating cutoffs way better, or way faster, I think, in that regard. But when you start pushing beyond like 1800, it becomes way harder to get rating as a healer. Like if you just look at the drop-offs, like DPS on average, I think are like 300 rating higher than healers. And that's just due to statistics of how shuffle lobbies work. DPS is likely, 25% of the time is going to go 0-6, which means healers are 3-3, which means they don't go up in rating. And there's a 25% chance that DPS goes 6-0, which means there's a 50% chance as a healer that you're going to gain no rating, especially at mid-level to high rating. So that's why statistically healers end up on average 300 rating lower than DPS. It's not because you're worse players. It's just the game is rigged it's rigged against you. But if you're getting to 1800, I think healer can be a really good way, especially if you're coming in on an alt. You want to gear up really fast, and then after you've geared it up, you keep getting those conquest tokens to send over to other characters. It can be a really good way to just quickly. I do it on my characters. I do it on all my characters. If I want to get an elite set on a class, I do it as a healer, and then it guarantees I get it out of the way. I don't have to worry about missing out on it before the next season. But most of the healers are pretty competitive with each other. Priest is still trending a little bit higher, but Druid, Shaman, Paladin, and maybe Monk and Prez, I would say, are like the weakest options of the two. Most susceptible to crowd control for Monk. Prez is just an absolute throughput issue. Like it feels so difficult to keep up with damage. I'm gonna have to keep track of it as I gear up more, because obviously I'm very under geared. But that has kind of been my vibe for the healers, is that most of them, probably one of the most balanced seasons that we've had, with a couple of little tweaks, right? Survivability up on like Death Knight Warlocks and Boomkins, a little bit of a throughput increase for preservation, and maybe some like tool adjustments for Mistweaver for crowd control avoidance, some new tools for them to avoid it. And I think we might be in a spot where the game is the most balanced it's ever been. Best catch-up mechanics, really fast gearing. I think it's probably looking like it could be, one of the best times to play. But that's my update here for the specializations. I hope this video was helpful to you during this meta analysis. And thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.